taking our seats and we're waiting for Christian to get his coffee. And but while wait, since we're a few minutes already late, I want to welcome you all for this meeting, the launch of the ERCST paper on agriculture, future of the ETS, agriculture ETS. Many of you may have been with us in other occasions, and especially for the discussions that we're doing on the ETS. You may know that about a year ago, we started a process called the Future of ETS, in which we look at a number of topics that are related to the review of the ETS that's going to take place next year. There were about 6 or 7 topics that we looked at: CDRs in ETS, international ETS, the scope of ETS, a number of things like that. And we are now down to the last 2 topics in this round, because obviously there is, we will continue to do work next year as the discussions continue and actually take off in a very practical way. So it is the agriculture in ETS, whether agriculture has a place in ETS. If it has a place in ETS, what kind of configuration, what kind of architecture, what kind of relationship it has with the rest of the ETS family. And then there's another broader paper that we are working on, and ERCSC has always made the case that ETS and CBAM are inseparable because they are joined at the hip. So we're working on a broader paper which deals with ETS and CBAM and how they interrelate to each other. The launch of that will be sometime in December. Second thing I want to say is that this is not our normal room. Good morning, Juan. Our normal room is at 61 Riyad Shimed, but we have discovered this room, and with an event that we did with the French Institute for Foreign Affairs, IFRI, a while ago. We liked it a lot. And actually, it has a bit of an Art Deco in it, I think, with the lights and this, to me. But it's a heck of a nice room, and it also has better acoustics and better video than what we struggle with sometime in our meeting room. So it may become a more common place for us to hold our meetings. We like it, and I think its architecture is good, sound is good, video is good. Why not? Anyway, just wanted to give people the heads up. The way we will proceed today is Nigel will make the presentation of the report that we have prepared. And this report has gone through a few iterations. We had meetings with our advisory group. We had meetings with the stakeholders that we try to listen to what people say. Again, as they would say, we don't have a pony in the race. It's not something that it's an ideological thing in many ways for us. It's just, I think, it's a practical thing, and we try to really find out what is the best solution according to our judgment. And then there will be an initial reaction from Christian Holzleiter. And thank you very much, Christian, for taking the time. We know it's a lot of work going on at the Commission right now, so we never take for granted your presence here. But also Antoine Hocha from Fertilizer Europe, Amanda Bjorksel from Copa Cogeca, and Magusia Ribak from CEPI. So we try to have a diverse set of views. What I don't see, and maybe I'm not seeing, I don't see my Danish friends here. Sorry. Yeah, but we're so used to see Tobias that he's become like a lightning rod. But happy to have you. So apologies. I happy that you're here, because to some degree this has come from discussion that we had with you guys. And again, we've had, I wouldn't say a strong relationship, but a good relationship for many years with the Danish Association. and we have exchanged views on many things. So we're very grateful for the continuation of this relationship in the future. Nigel will maneuver people on the screen because I actually used from being in my own room in Archimed. I didn't bring my computer. It was a reaction. I'm sorry to say this. So Nigel will have to be the one maneuvering with people on the screen. So there are about 30, 40 people on the Zoom. But Nigel, if you take it away, and then we'll go back to Christian.
Hi, can you hear me? Very good. We change the view. Perfect. So I'll quickly go through the report. The report has also been published on our website, but we will just present a shortened version here and give you the key focus areas which we think we will bring value to the discussion and debate in our report. So the first part of the report is painting the emission picture. So the question is emissions in agriculture. In 2023, the share of emissions in the EU coming from agriculture was 11.58%. With other decarbonization measures in other sectors, we expect this percentage, this piece of the pie, to only increase with time. The sector's emissions, we have to point out, did not decrease significantly in the first 20 years of this century. However, for the first 2 years after, we have experienced a slight year-on-year decrease. The first year-on-year decrease was 3.35, and the second was 0.74. Now, carbon intensity. Are we producing more with less emissions, or are we producing the same with the same amount of emissions, or more emissions and less production? We actually have been able to produce more with less. And this is partly why this carbon intensity was not pictured in the absolute emissions, because we managed to also produce more. So it was offset, right? Main attributes, the main types of activities that lead to emissions. We have farm production activities, so crop and livestock, land use change, and the pre and post production processes. And another important number that we should also know is if we are going to include agriculture into the EU ETS, who are the players? How many players? What are the installation numbers that we are looking to add? So in total, there are 9.1 million farms in the EU, and 41,000 of these are producer organizations, 22,000 of which are cooperatives. And the only current experience with the EU ETS in the agri-food value chain is in some food and drink producer level associated with combustion activity. So otherwise, there is not much experience with any ETS. Next, I won't go too much into detail in the legislative coverage of agriculture, but what is important to point out is that there is a lot of fragmentation covering the agriculture sector, right? There's a lot of regulation overlapping, and there has been some movement to try to consolidate this sector. However, the 2040 target remains the next opportunity to do so. So this is the biggest timeline, the biggest checkpoint that we have coming up. But why agriculture and carbon markets? What are the benefits that we look to bring, both from a perspective of decarbonization within this agriculture sector, but also the decarbonization of the whole of the EU? And the first point that at the RCST we always have to point to is cost effectiveness. That we believe that emissions abatement has to happen where it is least costly. And if this does not happen in the agriculture sector as well, and the agriculture emissions are not reduced, other sectors will have to pull the weight, right? Will have to do more, maybe at also at a higher price. The price signal, second benefit, price signal that incentivizes investment. Once you put a price to the carbon emissions, we have this price signal that drives the investment and the technological innovation. Number 4, we provide the much needed liquidity into the EU carbon market post 2030. I'm sure Andre will also mention this later. But the EU ETS, we know that by 2039, 2040, we will have a liquidity issue. Can the agriculture be one of the many, not the only, but one of the many solutions to this liquidity issue? Carbon removers, this is a very important point. We believe that to support decarbonization of other sectors, agriculture can be a very, very good source for carbon removers. With this carbon removals is the other point linking to it, that can lead to additional income for the farmers. And finally, another point is that it will also generate revenue that can go back into policies such as the cap. Impacts. Now, with the benefits, there are also the risks, and we did maybe focus more on the impacts and the risks associated with the sector, because as I'm sure all of you know, there are quite a few risks. And the impact on agri-food production. So we also know that agriculture is a way of life for 17 million EU citizens. Farmers already face tight margins, and we are in the context where the number of farmers in the EU is at a decline. Then the EU ETS, something that we haven't seen in the discussion in other reports, is the concept that the ETS is geographically agnostic, meaning that if the location of abatement where the decrease in emission happens is irrelevant. It's purely emission effective and efficiency focused. So if it happens in Greece, if it happens in Denmark, it doesn't make a big impact as long as it happens, right? However, agriculture activity is not transferable across regions. And with this point comes the cultural value of food. I don't want to be the one that goes to Piemonte region and tell all the Italians that we're not going to have cheese anymore and we're not going to have salumi anymore, because we have to decrease emissions there. So there's also the cultural value of food. We should also recognize that member states should maintain some production, even if it's at a emission-intensive level. And with that comes also that we have to continue producing more with less, because the demand for food is only expected to increase in the EU. Impact on food prices and public acceptance. It has a direct impact on final consumers. And this, I think, is the biggest communication hurdle that any agriculture policy has. We have to communicate it well. Who's going to pay the cost? Will it be the final consumer? If we're going to decrease the emissions in the agriculture sector, how will it be split, the cost between the producers, the farmers, the processors, the retailers, but ultimately also the consumers? If this also means that we have to change our diets, let's communicate this. And the fifth part is the cost of the transition. We have a range of estimates between 28 and 35 billion, but also the cost of inaction, so the cost of impact of climate change on the agriculture sector is around 50 billion. So who should bear all of these costs of transitioning or not transitioning? Then the impact on trade. As you know, the EU is a net exporter of agriculture goods. And if we are going to price emissions here, we also have to keep in mind that we do not want to impact the competitiveness of our EU agri-food sector. Second of all, if the supply of agriculture goods in the EU is affected by agri-ETS, but the demand for the same food in the EU remains, the only thing that's going to happen is they're going to import more food, right? And this is especially important in the context of the EU-Mercosur trade agreement, which is something which in our stakeholder meeting, it was mentioned quite a couple of times, especially because the potential costs are particularly acute in the livestock sector. Next, barrier and risks. MRV. We know that MRV for agriculture emissions is complicated, considerably more complex. I've been to also a couple of events in Brussels, and I've been hearing a plethora of different ways to measure MRV, and there is no harmonized way to do it. But measuring these emissions will be the rise or fall of a whole agri-ETS policy. And partly also there's unavoidable biogenic emissions. And the estimates for unavoidable emissions are about 60 to 65%. However, the definition of unavoidable emissions, residual emissions, are those that persist after all technically available measures have been implemented. So we also anticipate that this varies in light of any technological developments. But unavoidable emissions also vary strongly by area. A point that we also received in our stakeholder meeting, there's a big difference between an alpine cow in the Alps in Austria or Switzerland and a high-intensity cow in Denmark or the Netherlands producing milk for dairy products. Then, how to integrate agriculture into the carbon markets? We have three models that we looked into a bit more in detail. The first one being a separate EU ETS, And I want to point to maybe 3 points here. The benefits of a separate EU ETS, of course, is that you would acknowledge the unique characteristics of agriculture emissions and unavoidable emissions as well. And you ensure that the reductions in farming are pursued in parallel to other sectors. However, we also acknowledge that the cost effectivity and liquidity gains that we mentioned previously are not really resulting into the EU ETS, current EU ETS in ETS1, because we have separate systems. If we link them, what happens if we do link the system? So we envisage a scenario where there is a quantitative or a qualitative limit on the number of allowance to be transferred from the agriculture ETS into the ETS1. What we envisage is that there will be some level of fungibility, and this allows for some level as well of cost effectiveness and allocative efficiency. So abatement will occur where the marginal abatement cost is lowest, but as well, this depends on what the limits are, on what the limits are imposed. Liquidity, such a partial integration, could also provide some of that much needed liquidity that we mentioned, but again, it depends on the model and the numbers that we are looking at. And price discovery, linking strengthens price discovery. With higher liquidity, there will be a strong price discovery. But what we do recognize as well, that this is a balance where it also recognizes that agriculture is an inherently different sector and inherently different sector from the other industrial players we have in ETS1, but it still has a role to play. Inclusion, full inclusion. Full inclusion would bring the most benefit from a cost-effective and liquidity perspective. However, it will also bring the most risks for the farming sector. I don't want to dwell so much on the models, but something that we also looked at is which level of the value chain should the obligation of emission trading fall on. So the first is the upstream model, right? So this is the part where the emissions at the point of obligation happens before the emissions fall on the farm, right? So this is at the fertilizer and the feed producer level. The main benefit is that here we have some experience with an EU ETS, but we also have around 57% of the emissions covered. And this is around 220 million tons. And we also have around 5,300 manufacturing players. The number varies again by the thresholds that we imposed on this sector. Second is the downstream sector. So the downstream is the emissions that happen after the agriculture. So this is the point of obligation is based on the processors and the manufacturers of animal products. And mainly this means meat and dairy producers. Here, one of the main benefits is that we cover 82% to 91%, depending on the member state, of emissions linked to dairy production. And we have around 1,600 companies, installations with 50 plus employees. So this is the threshold that was looked at once. And mostly the concerns here, as the previous sectors, is that it will cascade down the chain. We have a lot of interdependence in the agri-food sector, and with this model, there's also that. The other model that is suggested is at the farm level. And here we know that this is the primary source of agricultural emissions, but there's a big but, and that is the MRV feasibility. If we have 9.1 million farms, does that mean that we want 9.1 million installations trading? Does that mean that every farmer is now an operator of allowance and a trader? This leaves a lot of risks, and the only benefit that we see is that it would cover all the emissions. And then a hybrid. As always, there's always a middle ground. We believe that a hybrid approach where farmers could participate voluntarily, where they can generate and sell those carbon removal credits, but also there's a point of obligation that falls in a mix between the upstream and also the downstream with high thresholds. The thresholds can also change in the medium to longer term. Now, what type of emissions? As we know, the agriculture ETS brings a new complex issue to the ETS, is that most of its emissions are non-CO2 gases. So we are looking also at methane and nitrogen oxide coming from fertilizers. And part of this is also unavoidable. It's not as an industrial installation plant where we know exactly with a bit more clarity, let's say, when the emissions are in which part of the process the emissions are coming out. And we have also looked at the base deduction model that was proposed in Denmark and is currently implemented in Denmark, where a certain part of the emissions that we know are unavoidable are not part of their taxing scheme. Then, what is the role of removals? We believe that removals can offer significant potential for both revenue and for the farmers, but also to bring allowances and these credits into the EU ETS. So if we sell the agriculture ETS, there is a revenue stream for the farmers. There's also benefit to come for the farmers. It will also help in its political feasibility. However, at the same time, with removals, we have to improve current MRV practices, and the measuring of removals will have to improve with time. Then, integrating agriculture and carbon markets, the big one, agriculture exports. How do we deal with exports exposure? How do we deal with emission leakage in the agriculture sector? What we have looked at are transitionary free allowances, the CBAM, but also the base deduction model can be also superseded onto a potential way to reduce the risks of carbon leakage. And the other point is targeted support. So support for those exporting producers within the EU. Then MRV, what we believe are the main options. There are several design responses, but what we believe are the main options that we have to look at are that we start with the measurable and reducible emissions. And we focus on thresholds and proportionality for MRV initially, but then we believe that with the investment that we foresee upcoming in digital monitoring systems, it can improve with time. But again, let's not try to do everything all at once, but we start slowly. Now, the final sector, what we recommend, Andre, and what we recommend from the proposed model, we recommend that we start initially with a linked or parallel system. So either a separate agri ETS with the vision of a future link, or initially with already a link. We don't think that a full inclusion immediately is the right approach, and we need the ability for gradual learning to limit disruption and maintain this flexibility and sort of learn until we go along. The ETS, until we got it right from 2004 until, let's say, the last revision, it took us 20 years. We can't expect the agriculture sector to do the same in 4 or 5 years. And we believe that with a limit, it acknowledges the structurally difference between the industrial sector and agricultural sector. Recommendation number 2, we believe that a hybrid approach is the best. I think a hybrid approach where we have the incentive for the farmers to consider to start dipping their finger in this removal stream, the removal revenue stream. What is this? They start looking at it. It can generate interest. It can attract innovators in the sector, and matched with a strong hybrid approach where some obligation falls on both the upstream and also the downstream with high thresholds initially. But again, maintaining proportionality should encourage the most cooperation across all the agri-food chain. Next recommendation, which emissions? So, as we said, the initial focus should be on the emissions we are able to measure and verify currently at this state. Then we consider that the Danish model, where we have a base deduction model for the unavoidable emission, should be considered EU-wide for an agriculture ETS. On the role of removals, I think I've made it clear from the get-go. Removals should be incorporated into the agri ETS from the onset. We believe that the target reduction in emissions can be heavily complemented by also these allowances, by these credits. And I think it will enable to monetize these verified carbon sequestration. We believe that an agriculture ETS without removals will be a difficult sell. It will be a difficult sell to the farmers without showing that there is a revenue stream. Our final 2 recommendations, bear with me. Recommendation number 5, safeguarding competitiveness. In light of the geopolitical context we are currently facing, we believe that a transitional free allocation, either in a base deduction model or an initial also transactional free allocation for the upstream and downstream processes, is the way to go. However, a CBAM-like measure for agricultural good is not off the table, and I think it should be explored. However, again, it depends on its design features and that it really encapsulates. It really encapsulates.
Things got to happen at the end.
Things that happen in one final recommendation that we have. I have no idea. Can you call it up?
Why don't you just read it?
Yeah, and the last recommendation is MRV. MRV must be robust, harmonized, and proportionate. We acknowledge that there are better people to speak on MRV than us, but what we can say is that it should be proportionate and harmonized at an EU level. We believe that if we have different MRV approaches across the EU, it will be difficult to mitigate their risks, and it would be difficult to invest in the infrastructure needed for the aggregate emission monitoring. And I think that was the final recommendation. It happened in the end.
Okay, but I think that while the presentation is over, I'm worried because we lost the people on the screen. I'm not sure whether they still exist. Are they still there or they have been lost in space? The other thing is I saw a few people coming in late. That, okay, I'm not here to police people when they come in, but my only concern is, did you have trouble finding it because there were no signs? Well, thank you very much for that. So that's lesson learned. We have to have signs. Anyway, apologies for that, and it's not our interest for this to happen again, or we're terribly sorry.
Okay.
Thank you for that as well. This is, we'll have an internal discussion over that. But that's okay. These things
Okay.
The one online.
it happens, as they say, it happens in the best families. But
Anyway.
it shouldn't happen, but it happens in the best families. Now, the couple of things I want to say is, I used to be CEO of the International Emission Trading Association, AIDA, and I remember the first board meeting, there was a fellow from BP, Sir Charles Nicholson, and he said, the first order of the day, Andre, is do we still need this organization? And I said, this guy is crazy. I just quit my job in the UN to take this on. So the first order of the day is yes, agriculture. What do we do with it? And please note that in this case, we looked at agriculture in the ETS, in the cap and trade system. That's what we looked at. In this analysis, we didn't say, well, should we do something about it or not? That was not something that was considered. And the other thing that was not considered was that there are other approaches. There are other approaches, product standards. Is that also a possible approach? Also a possible approach. We did not consider this. But these are things that I suspect that when the broader conversation is going to come in as to what we do with agriculture for the climate policy in the EU, these will need to be considered because there are options. They may be discarded, but they're nevertheless options. Now, you look at an ETS, and the ETS in the end, the cap and trade is the fact that you pay for your allowances, or at least the movement is clearly in the direction of auctioning, so you pay for the damn thing. The question is, is this also creating some issue? We're hearing from others in industry that this is creating some issues in terms of the amount of funds available for decarbonization. I'm just raising it because it's something that, if there's a different model other than a cap and trade. The next thing is that I wanted to say, and that he mentioned it, but towards the end, because this is where it fitted, was the issue of competitiveness. And I don't know how much you're involved in this. I have part of my life that is 80% European domestic, but I spend about 25% internationally, and I just spend a lot of money trying to go to this COP in Brazil. Believe me, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, I know.
I know. But the Brazilians have created or have launched something about a couple of weeks ago in Geneva, something called the Integrated Forum on Climate and Trade. Climate trade is becoming, in what they would call, the BRICS would call unilateral trade measure, is becoming an increasingly important topic under the Framework Convention on Climate Change. I'm also going to Geneva in a couple of weeks. Also, people looking in the WTO context at this. Now, I don't need to tell most of you and those of you that are agriculture what the Brazilian reaction is going to be if you put a CBAM on agriculture. I mean, this is Argentinian reaction, South African reaction. This is going to be not a nice reaction. So it's not something minor. It is something that relates to free trade, it relates to many other issues. And finally, refer to price and how do we communicate. I don't think that communicate the fact that the prices are going to increase, which they will increase, is a matter of communication. I mean, it's not, we're not here to spin things. I think that it's important for people to understand. And in the end, it's a democratic society and people need to have the right to make choices. So these are important topics that we think about. The most important one that I wanted to mention is the fact that we simply looked at ETS as we know it. We didn't look at other option. I didn't compare with our option, which should be compared. Christian, I want to know, as a friend of the house, because we've known each other for many years, your honest assessment, and don't mince your words, please.
Good morning. Thanks a lot, Andre, Nigel. Yeah, I think a very profound, solid study on the ETS itself. And I think I'll already open up a bit to the broader context at which we are looking into this. And this is something I usually start with when I talk about that, is I'm very bullish about the bioeconomy. It will be one of the growth sectors in a climate neutral economy. We need more from our land. There will come more demand as we cannot use or we will not use any more fossil carbon. We'll need more biogenic carbon as a feedstock, the chemical sector, in construction, still as fuel, using the residues there. So this is a lot of demand coming to the sector, coming to the farmers. Food is getting more and more also a lifestyle. So there's also a willingness to pay there. So I think this will be good. This will be good business. About that, I'm not worried. And we are not talking about a declining sector. And I think we are also interested that for 2050 we have a healthy and resilient bioeconomy. And in particular for Europe, land is our biggest natural asset that we have. We don't have fossil assets. What we have is the land. And it will be challenging to manage it because we have the impacts of climate change. So we need to look into this. We'll have big questions coming our way. How do we use our land? And there are, I think, a lot of measures that we can take that are good for climate, for the fertility of our soils, for biodiversity, and so on. These are also partly low-hanging fruits that we need to make happen. So, and I think it's in the interest of everyone from the whole value chain. And I think it's very nice, Andre, that we have a large set of the value chain, both from the ones who produce the inputs that we need, but also all the opportunities that we then have, what we do with food and biomass afterwards. So, and I think this is in the interest of all, and there are things having more biogenic carbon, doing agroforestry for better water management, landscape approaches, reducing the emissions from livestock, going into biogas, going into biomethane, how to better use the residues, circular economy, bioeconomy. So there's a lot that we can do and a lot that makes sense for everyone. So but how do we get the financing? How do we get the things done? So I think this is from where I start. And we've been doing now a lot of consultations, meetings over the last years. We'll come out with the next study on that. And I think one thing is very clear to me, and this will only work if climate action is good business for farmers. This needs to provide additional income for farmers, and it needs to be voluntary for farmers to start with. Otherwise, we will not succeed. On the other hand, we hear a lot of interest from the value chain, because I think people understand very well the climate risk, the risk of droughts, higher fertility of soils within Europe, but also on our international value chains. And we see with the highly fluctuating prices of some commodities, this has a real impact. So, and I think what we see are a lot of the big food corporates, everyone is trying to do something, has their own projects on regenerative agriculture and so on, but everyone is struggling with the monitoring, reporting, verification, with having a level playing field. What we also hear a lot is, yeah, I'm very ready to finance there, but what if my competitors are not doing it? How can I justify these additional investments? And it's a bit of a public good challenge. The quality of the resilience of our land is a public good from which we all profit. So we need to find a way how to finance that investments in a fair way. So I think there's a sweet spot for us where we can be helpful with what we are doing. We are doing a lot for the moment on the carbon removal, carbon farming certification. So in creating a level playing field for how can you quantify the benefits from all the different actions that you can do. So we are there with our methodologies for biochar, for bio-CCS, which is also quite important for what we are discussing here, biomethane and so on. We will soon come with our methodologies for afforestation, rewetting of peatlands, soil carbon and agroforestry. And with that, we hope that we can work towards having this one single harmonized methodology, because I think this is what is missing currently in Europe. We don't have a harmonized methodology on how to quantify the climate benefits of all these measures that we want to take. So I think that we can provide working all together, and it's not just with focus on the carbon market itself, but it needs to be in line with what companies report, the company inventories and the national inventories. We need to get all of that together, otherwise we will not succeed. And because the things that you're doing in Denmark is really like leading the way on what we also should do at the European level with regard to monitoring, reporting and verification. And I think in that what we are looking into is how can we provide good financial incentives with a view of making climate action a good business for everyone involved. We are out there now with several studies, both for the permanent removals as well as for agriculture. So we are very interested in looking into public-private purchasing programs, so to create a market for our certificates for our units, and how can we draw in the demand that exists from within the value chain, but also still from outside the value chains, from financial institutions and so on, and also to see, okay, what should be financed within the value chain, what should be financed outside the value chain. Well, for example, I see like the rewetting of peatlands, or if you take land out of production, that could be something to be financed from outside the value chain. But how can we get started with such a public-private purchasing program? We have experience from other sectors, like how we procure hydrogen. We're just out there with a reverse option for heat, where we raise a lot of interest. We're also looking with much interest what the US Department of Agriculture has done on a public-private purchasing program for carbon farming. So, and it's there, I think, where we want to get started. So maybe in terms of your recommendations, even like more a recommendation 0 from before is, we need to get the MRV right. We need to get the financial incentives.
Thank you very much. Christian, I just want to make sure that everybody on the Zoom can hear well. I'm told that the sound in this room is not bad and the microphones work well, but if that is not the case, somebody should say something. Otherwise, we don't know. Amanda, can you hear us? There you go. Thank you. I understand that strike and other impediments stopped you from joining us. Sorry, but we're happy to have you on the screen.
Thank you. Very well. Also, I will try to speak slow.
Amanda, you're breaking up quite badly, and we can not really. I think this is a problem. May I suggest that we just give me a second, please. I think, Amanda, I think it may be from your microphone. I'm told I don't have any reason to say yes or no, but is there anything that it may be a problem from your mic? Can you hear us?
Yes.
I don't know. I can't tell whether it's yours or not. Is there somebody in the office that we can ask to see if this is ours or not? Can you try again?
Yes.
My suspicion is it is from your mic.
Yes, I changed my mic now. Is that working better?
Not successful. I think it's safe to say not successful.
Small improvement.
Small improvement in the right direction, but not there.
Yeah, can I continue to speak? I'm trying to change the settings. Can you hear me now?
Maybe,
No.
maybe
Can you hear me when I speak now?
if you're using headphones, maybe you just use your computer microphone. Maybe it's a better deal if you use the computer microphone rather than using your headphones. I don't know. I'm guessing here now. Certainly, we started the movement towards coffee. Amanda, if you allow us, while we try to figure out you're also frozen now. It may be that your signal is unstable, or I'm guessing so. Sorry, guys. That's a lot of things we have control over. This one, I don't. If I think that, Amanda, while we try to figure out how exactly, can you hear us? Can you try once more? No, it's a bad one. No, I think, Amanda, I think your connection is the signal in your Wi-Fi signal seems to be very weak because you're coming out very choppy in your picture. Maybe try to turn the picture off, maybe just the sound. May that work?
Yes.
No, Amanda, it doesn't work. I would suggest that we give you, while we have the other intervention, see if you can go to another network or maybe to a hotspot on your phone or something. But I think I'd like to move on. But we need to move on to the next presenter. But see, because the signal is very bad, the picture is choppy, the sound is choppy. So it is from your side, and other people on the Zoom tell us that they cannot hear you either. So it's not us. I think it's your system for some reason. Let me go to Margosia and see if you can get another signal somewhere, Amanda. Margosia?
If I may, maybe Antoine is better placed to go next, and then I'll end because I'm going to change a little bit the dynamic. So
Well, if you look, I'm democratic here. Antoine?
Well, I'm then interested to hear what you will say about the dynamics. Now, First thing, first, I like very much reading the report, and I think there is a lot of good work being done there. It's a very complicated topic, and first, it's the farmers that are at the center, and I'm not here to talk on their behalf. But there are also things where probably you've been a bit too optimistic when we're talking about MRV, for example. MRV for agricultural system, it's very, very complicated because emissions, they depend on the climate. They depend on the type of products that you use, the timing when you do the fertilization, be it with chemical fertilizers or organic fertilizers, manure, on the soil type. So actually, it's a headache for scientists. So we're far from having something uniform, but that's still a detail. I liked, Andrei, what you said, that we're talking about an agri ETS here, but we should keep all options open. And for me, option 0 actually is doing things that we know are functioning without necessarily a framework of an ETS. We know that there are farm management measures and methods that have demonstrated results for reducing emissions, and we can and we should incentivize those without going into an ETS. There are other ways. So our first thoughts, let's say, is looking more at carrots rather than sticks, because we should not forget ETS in itself is a stick. And a stick that works. I'm not saying the contrary, but look at carrots. When we're talking about farming, the first thing is also nutrient use efficiency. How we can improve the nutrient use efficiency in the farm, so with the same amount of nutrients, we can produce more food, because agriculture is about producing food. And there are, as you said, Christian, low-hanging fruit. So let's make sure we take all these low-hanging fruits before we going into a full system that would certainly need a thorough impact assessment, because the food chain is very complex, but it's also a very sensitive topic. Everyone, when I go to my supermarket, my Deleuze, not to mention it, I'm very okay. It's simply because it's 30 meters from my home, so I'm lazy, or I work too much. No, but it's very sensitive topic, food and price of food. So we should also be very careful. We're talking about creating new income from farmers, yes, but at the end, who's going to pay for it? Because it's amount of money. And I just simply look at the number here, for example, it's talking about 220 million tons of CO2 equivalents. If you put 100 euros on it, it's 22 billions. Who's going to pay these 22 billions? Clearly, the farmers cannot pay for it. If you put the burden on, I'm talking about myself, so fertilizer industry, it will cascade to farmers that cannot pay it. So we have a problem there. And then if you put it at the end consumer, it goes into food inflations. So we have to be very careful in putting additional burden on the food chain. I would personally prefer more to go into these carrots and implementing what we already know works in the farm. You can use cover crops, you can use inhibitors, slow release fertilizers, new technologies, digital tools. All these things will happen rather than putting a plain tax that, I mean, what will be the effect for incentivizing? This is I'm missing a bit, but I will leave it here. I'm looking forward for discussion actually, and as I said, I'm very curious to hear what farmers are saying, and of course, Malgosia, she made everyone curious.
Malgosia is being strategic. This is when, I don't know if you ever watch a U.S. convention, U.S. nomination convention, and they go in there and somebody places a presidential candidate in on the floor, and they go around and the great state of this and the great state of that, and then get the great state of New York passes because they wait to see what the other guys will do. So this is a little bit like that. Malgosia's passed waiting to see what he said. But ladies first, Amanda, are you back? Are you with us?
I am
Amanda?
back. I tried. Hello.
Yes.
Now, can you hear me now? Maybe.
I think it's like a ray of light. So let us just to boost the signal for a little bit. I think that would be helpful if you can boost the signal a bit. Hang on a second. Give us a second.
How do you?
I think can you boost the signal from your side? Can you make it a little bit louder?
Yes, I'm trying now.
No,
Is
that's
that
okay. I
loud?
think we're fine. I think let's not tempt the devil. Let's move on. Okay, go ahead, please, Amanda.
Thank you. I'm so sorry for this inconvenience. Thank you for enabling this more climate smart way of participating. In a sense, I think it's really good. My name is Amanda Björksell, and I'm the chairperson of the Copacabana Working Party of Environment. And I have followed these discussions on the Ag ETS the last years. Thank you for the presentation and a very interesting report. It was truly interesting. I appreciate the bit broader take than maybe on the last trinomic report, even though maybe we have wanted you to look even further. So the question is the ETS the only alternative we have? Because we don't think so. Climate and agriculture is a very important topic. Agriculture is affected by climate change. It is a sector that generates emissions, but we're also part of the solution, and we also heard the importance of carbon storage and so on. And I totally agree with Holzleitner, who just said that we need a resilient bioeconomy. But we come back to the big question, the finance. I think you have touched upon it also by the last speaker. And we also have to remember that agriculture serves many purposes, the main one being producing food. And climate measures should support food production, not restrict it on an EU level. And just to link this, I just arrived from an EU conference on grassland restoration in Hungary last week, where one of the biggest topics was how we can turn the negative process of land abandonment. In some areas, we really need more farmers and more grazing animals. And we see a risk with this kind of emission trading systems that will just speed on this abandonment process, and as you also state in the report, negatively affect the smaller farms. I think we also have to see that agriculture, and I think you mentioned this in the report, that it is a different sector. The emissions are to a large extent biogenic. They are more difficult to measure. They are more difficult to control. They depend heavily on environmental factors like weather and soil condition, and the result from one tool might be very different depending on where the farm is situated and the conditions for the farm. And this must be reflected in how we actually tackle the climate challenges we have. And we don't really see that an ETS is appropriately doing that. We also see that agriculture and agricultural processes will always generate emissions, that they are unavoidable emissions. I think it's interesting that you mention it, and also how that depends on the type of farm. But that's also one of the reasons why we are very see kind of red flags when we see linkages between agriculture and the existing emission trading systems, but because they aim to really reduce the emissions to zero. And I think that's something for other sectors that is fully realistic. But for agriculture, those instruments, and especially linking the biogenic emissions from agriculture with tools for the fossil emissions from other sectors, that is really risky. I will not speak too long. I will just mention some good things in the report. The mentioning of that agriculture is linked to place, and that we have to reflect on the cultural value. But also the risk for food prices, the risk for emission leakage, the potential risks for small livestock and dairy producers, and the fact that farmers, many of farmers operate already now on very tight margins and can have weak bargaining power. And also the challenges with the MRV. I think all of these barriers and concerns you raise in the report are very valid, and something we can actually address more together. When it comes to the conclusion, okay, what do we do then? We are a bit, of course, concerned with the ETS as a system, just because of the barriers you mentioned. We see that a standalone agri-ETS is not the most effective way to achieve the EU climate goals, due to the factors I just mentioned. So we see that the path forward should be more of a, and I refer also to the last speaker, that maybe we need more carrots than sticks. We see that this kind of compliance-based mechanism, which is an agri-ETS, will not be the most efficient. So we need to have a more multi-phased approach where we can integrate incentives, regulatory clarity, reduce the administrative burden, and have market-driven solutions where we can actually encourage the farmers that are striving to be more efficient to reduce their climate impact, without having these kind of more compliance-based systems. So thank you for the report and for the contribution also to this discussion. You raise very important things, but we from the farmers' side, we are still not agreeing that an ETS is the best way to go, or the most efficient way to go. Not saying that we shouldn't work with this very important topic, but I think we have to look even broader than the ETS systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. I mean, the first order of the day is that we managed to get you on the screen, which is a success in itself. So glad that we could do this. The second order of the day is, I mean, another Austrian, Peter Zappel. And I remember that we were having 2016, something like that, and we're having a discussion about, I think it was MSR, I can't remember, something, MSR, something like that. And I was in another think tank at that time, and we're having discussion, and people are kind of going around and kind of making statements and kind of, as they say in America, pussyfooting around. And I said, listen, guys, I mean, this guy is going to have to go back to the office at some point, and not him by himself, but a collegial decision with the senior colleagues, et cetera, are going to have to make a decision. What do we do? Now, it may not be imminent, may not be tomorrow, it may take some time and so on, but I would encourage people to actually say what they want, because unless you say what they want, you're going to have to say what you want after the proposal is out. And once the proposal is out, I'll remind you that no matter what people think, it is more complex to actually modify it radically. If there is if you think that this is not the solution at all, So listen, this is who we are, and we hope people are going to be direct and really express us. But maybe it's not the time for some of you. We appreciate that. Malgosia?
Hello, everyone. Well, I guess for us, it's easy to say what we want. And it's sort of similar to what Christian said. We want resilient, circular bioeconomy. And the reason why I wanted to come last is because I'm not going to talk about agriculture. I'm going to talk more about forestry. That's where our feedstock is coming from. This is where our companies are sourcing the material that they use. And to give you a little bit of maybe a picture how we see the value chain and why, and also there's another thing that I normally don't talk about LULUCF, and probably most of you don't talk about LULUCF that much, but I checked my speaking points of my colleagues, so I should be safe. When we look at forestry and the use of forestry, we look at it in a value chain approach. So there's already a benefit of carbon stored in forestry that we have. We are looking at carbon sink, that there's also a target for Europe to have that carbon sink. And then when we're looking at the products, there's a carbon storage connected to the products that are on the market. So for example, the furniture that we're using, the tables, they are storing biogenic carbon and they are removing carbon as we are here in the room. And then there's also another benefit of using feedstock from forestry, which is connected to substitution effects. So whenever we're not using fossil as a feedstock for textile, there is a benefit for that as well. And it is true, on a daily basis, I work on the ETS, and we do know what the carrot and stick of the ETS means when it comes to our emissions. So when we look at policies and trying to figure out what is that we're trying to achieve, the first thing that we saw today in the slides when we talk about agriculture, it's about emissions. The first thing that you think about when you think about forests is about carbon sink and negative emissions. And here for us, it's very important to strike a balance, to be able to use forest as a feedstock, as a source of biomass for bioeconomy, and at the same time to be able to have the carbon stored and have the carbon sink in Europe. And I think that this is where we're coming from in this discussion. And another thing that hasn't appeared on the slides today, probably it's because we talk about the ETS and putting together agriculture and forestry is a niche topic, but it's not so niche for us. So when we discussed the Fit for 55 package, there was an idea to put together agriculture, forestry, and other land use together in one sector. And another thing that we don't want them to be together. So, and that means that what we see coming from forestry and the benefit of removing carbon, that needs to be safeguarded against the agriculture emissions that we see right now coming from the sector. And this leads us to a more balanced policy framework, which allows us to reduce emissions where they need to be reduced, count on carbon removals where we can measure that, and then be able to switch from fossil as a feedstock for materials and fuels to bio-based solutions. And here, what we're talking about, to put a number, for those of you that don't work on LULUCF, it's 310 million tons of a target that we have on forestry to deliver carbon sink. And this needs to be balanced in the future framework as well. And this is why we're also interested in putting policies on sectors where the emission reductions needs to occur, so that we are always able to provide, to be climate adapted as in Europe with the forest that we have right now, but also we are able to provide carbon sequestration and have access to raw materials. So with this, you can already hear that we're concern about overemphasizing the carbon removals and carbon sink that needs to be provided by forests. For us, when we look at the value chain, it's really, we're going to see the benefits, not only even for us, when it comes to carbon removals, bio-CCS, the carbon certification that Kristin mentioned, there's a vast potential in our sector to deliver that with all of those installations that were kicked out from the ETS, actually. Then there's going to be a potential for carbon removals connected to products. So construction, wooden construction, over 35 years is there as well. So here, we're seeing policies that also going to allow us to account better for what is already available as a carbon sink. And I think that the mention of MRV and looking at inventories and looking at what companies are already reporting versus what member states are reporting, that's exactly the gap that we should look at. And when it comes to the next policy framework, what is going to happen post 2030, I think that there are two elements. First element from our side is predictability, because at the end of the day, the investments that we make in forestry are not something that you do for 2 years. The same goes for bio-CCS. If we were to capture biogenic carbon and store it permanently, it's not something that you do for 5 years. Ideally, these are investments that are going to stay there until 2050. So when looking at land use change, and forestry, the long-term perspective and having an understanding what is the impact on carbon sinks, on biogenic carbon, on the carbon that we use in the economy and how long it stays in the cycle beyond 2050, that's the perspective that we should be looking at, or at least this is what we encourage people to look at. And I'll stop myself here with saying that it is very easy because that's what the policy framework also taught us. It's very easy to look very punctually at emissions or at removals, while in reality for a sector like ours, it is very important to look at whatever your feedstock is coming from, or your food from the less is coming from, to the production, and then how long we're using certain products, how long they're staying in the economy. So this value chain approach is something that we would like to see more in the policy. And going back to a document that probably not many of you are interested in, bioeconomy strategy, it's the place where we would like to see that reflected.
Thank you, Margarita. I'm not sure how you handle this on that computer, but I think that we should make sure that if there are people that would like to speak on the from the virtual audience, that we're aware of it. I don't know how you do this. Normally, they raise their little electronic hand, and I can see it on the I can see it on my computer screen. I will leave that to the capable hands of Nigel, how he's going to handle this. So if there's anything on the virtual participation, I'll very much encourage that, because again, we're not only the ones in the room, but everybody else. Also, the people here in the room will hope that this makes it conducive to discussion. As Christian has said, we generally speaking make an effort to have the diversity of views and opinions on our panels in our rooms, because that's, there needs to be a conversation. These are not minor topics. They are topics that are coming back and back and back, and we have to make sure we get it as well as right as possible. Not perfect, but as right as possible. Christian, let me ask you a question first. So where do we go now? I mean, what is the thing? What is the plan? What is the roadmap?
As I've already said, we are working a lot on the certification methodologies. So this is something we want to finish. And of course, once we have that, we need a market. And this is what we are working on. I've always said we've done several studies on that, and we are very much looking into, together with the value chain, how can we create those markets? How can we create that level playing field that is attractive for farmers, that it's attractive for the companies within the value chain to invest here? So I think we'll look more into the idea of a public-private purchasing program. We've also called it EU Buyers Club, and so on. So this is something we want to work on. We are also very keen to look into how can we combine what we do here on the market level with our next edition of the climate targets that we should come with maybe by the end of the year. So the overall calendar is, or we come with the proposal for the emission trading system mid of 26, where the integration of permanent removal is already a big topic, which I think is also for the agriculture sector. If we look into biogas, biomethane, biochar, an important one, and then we are working on the evaluation of the LULUCF regulation and starting to work on the impact assessment. And I think where there can be a lot of synergies with what we are doing here, with the certification, with creating this voluntary market, that can help member states then to much better invest into climate action, be it with the common agricultural policy, be it with joining us maybe for a purchasing a program, setting up their own certification schemes. There are so many options that can be done, and we hear a lot of good reactions also from member states. And then we need to, in the same way we want to be helpful for the food corporates so that they can improve their climate reporting, that we can help them to more efficiently achieve their climate targets, their resilience of the value chains, and creating the space for the new products with nitrification inhibitors and so on. So it's for us a lot about creating those markets, tapping into that potential, and doing this with everyone within the value chain. So I very much like that. That it should be about all value chains. We need all value chain actors on board. So I think we shouldn't just focus on one, not just on the farmer or just on a producer. It's all together, and how we can create these markets. And of course, that plays a lot into the bioeconomy strategy. That also plays a lot into the circular economy strategy. So there are a lot of pieces of the puzzles that we can put together. But I think that a carbon market for the agri-food value chain, for the forestry value chain, can be a very effective means that we move towards this resilient bioeconomy that we want for 2050.
So the expectation, we would see something relatively concrete also, probably the 26 mid-year proposal. Maybe there will be something in that time frame, whether there will be something there. I'm not asking you to commit, but I will stop. I will not push. Anyone in the room, please. I mean, it's an opportunity to have a conversation and a free-flowing conversation. So the lady over there, and then Hans Rust, and the gentleman here. Okay, so there's 4 people. So yeah, you go first, but okay.
Thank you. I'm Harsha from the European Landowners Organization. Well, pardon my American. I'll try not to seafood around and say that, as other people said, I don't think the ETS is the way forward. An ag ETS is the way forward. Mostly for the reason that even if we need to look into markets, and that's a good approach. What we've seen so far is that the market is actually getting much worse, right? The more we actually talk and put and focus on the complications, within the sector, the more we notice that the market is actually disappearing, right? And one of the reasons was also pointed out is the structural problems. Farmers are the weakest link in the value chain, right? And if we are not paid for the food we produce, expect that we will have a proper value for secondary products, might be too optimistic, as some said too. So putting agriculture only a separate basket, knowing that with limitations, we are indeed questioning if this is the best way to go. There was also some other comments that raised some questions. Here, if I understood correctly, said Christian that all value chains should be on board, but separate still. So agriculture is still separate and forestry, right? If I understood correctly. And also the other question that I have is linked with another market that now we're talking about, which is the nature credits market. Do you see some potential linkage there? Do you see it totally separate? Because we're still talking about the same asset, which is land. And that's actually where we should probably put the focus on, because we seem to understand the value, but then when it comes to how to make it more resilient, where to get the money from, there is where the difficulties lie. So I would be curious to see if you are actually considering the linkage with other types of markets there, namely the nature credits. I probably wasn't that clear, but thank you.
Well, if you're not, again, if we're not clear, we'll come back, and I'm sure there will be follow-up questions. Again, it's not only what you're not for, what you are for. It's also useful. Hans?
My name is Hans Thyssen from Danish Agriculture and Food Council. We can discuss what's best, agri-ETS and other things to reduce emission on or to make motivations for reduction on agricultural. I agree that the carrot is very important here. But what I didn't hear anything talk about was what the whole basis to reduce emissions, and that was the measures. Of course, we need measures to could reduce emissions from agriculture. Without measures, we can't do anything. So my question would be, what do you think about, or what's the plan of investments in research and innovation for measures? In Denmark, we are making a huge investments, or use a lot of money in developing new and make new documentation of new measures. Have you any plans in EU level to do that? Because that's the most important thing to do.
Let's take one more question and then see if there's any reaction from the panel. Again, I hate this to be, it invariably becomes a question and answer with the commission, but it's not the purpose, because there are other people in here, and that's why they were invited on the panel. I'll go that way. Who was the first year? The gentleman there, and then, okay, I don't know all the names, so apologies for that. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Maurizio Guadagni, an independent consultant working for FAO and other organizations. I have a question and a comment. One of the first statements was that the emission intensity of agriculture has been going down. And I would be interested to know how this was estimated. Because you can reduce intensity by increasing crop production while reducing livestock production. Yet this may lead to import more livestock products. And Europe has been importing more meat from Latin America, for example. And this actually is a lose-lose situation, because emissions in Latin America to produce meat are higher than in Europe. And you end up, you risk penalizing farmers in Europe while increasing emissions globally. You may reduce emissions in Europe, but globally they risk to increase. So I believe it's important that every analysis understand clearly how this intensity gets reduced and avoid that any measure taken in Europe would induce increase of emissions in other parts of the world? Thank you.
I think I'll take one more. Well, that decided for me. There you go.
Excuse me. Do you hear me? Yeah. Because I have much connected what the colleague said, and then if
You want to introduce yourself briefly?
I worked for European Commission, and I worked for Lithuanian national government for DG Environment. Now we have Association for Climate Europe, but I want a few observations based on my last year's experience with project of DG Environment for environmentally harmful subsidies. We did here with VVA consultant. My recent work, I just finished Lithuanian Environmental Agency, where my job been to calculate reduction of CO2 emissions from agriculture for update of National Energy and Climate Plan. So first of all, as the Danish colleague said, more measures to reduce CO2 emissions from agriculture. We calculated maybe 10 or 15 measures, I do not remember already, for new energy and climate plan of Lithuania. So these potentials, for example, are enormous. We developed our unique methods. I can pass to colleague from DG Klima some measures we evaluated based on IPCC. As for national inventory, some we've been doing a lot of research to invent different coefficients for measures. We think they could be very effective. And here, of course, new measures which we wanted to introduce and introduce being short supply chains, that to use more local products in supermarkets, no-till agriculture, and food, meat production, to put more vegetarian food to canteens, to schools, and in general. And and farmers, they are much willing to cooperate. They are very environmentally cautious, but some of them need, for example, new tilling equipment for no-till agriculture. And as it relates to DG Environmental, that project, I finish. We also think that meat production, more cooperation with CAP and DG Agri, that meat production is more environmental harmful, what we calculated than, for example, fossil fuels. So it's just short. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Who wants to react to, including if you want to react, Amanda? Anybody wants to react to this intervention that we had so far?
Well,
You start.
maybe I can say something.
I said you should press on the speaker. Is it the speaker?
Yes,
Okay. All right.
I did.
All right.
It's red.
I will screw up.
No, thank you. No, I want to react maybe a bit also to what Hans is saying. Because indeed, what is actionable at the end? What do we have to do? What does the farmer have to do? And Hans, you were mentioning, sorry, investment and R&D and research, and of course, I mean, we need to do the R&D and develop new things and new technologies and views and plans. But there are already many things that exist. We should start by applying, and I'm talking for what I know, fertilizers. Today, urea is a widespread fertilizer in Europe. Start coating urea if you with inhibitors. If you put inhibitors, you can cut emissions by 80%. Okay, it's not 100%, but nothing is perfect in life. If we do 80%, it's already quite a lot. The question is how it's known. It's nothing new. Question is, how do we support farmers to do that? Because of course there is a cost and farmers cannot bear the cost. So how can we help the farmers and make what we know happen in practice?
Anyone else? Amanda or Malgosia or anyone else? Christian? I don't know. Yeah, go ahead, Amanda.
Thank you. Also for there were some good questions in the comments also, which I hope that you will address. For example, the emission intensity, and I think we have to remember when we look at the climate impact of agriculture to both look at the territorial emissions within the European Union, but also compare it with the emissions per kilo meat, for example, or kilo product to see which development we actually have. But I think we're starting to touch on the elephant in the room here, which is the finance and how we support farmers. And I think there was a good comment on how do we make people, either if that is consumers or the companies, pay for additional very important values such as climate mitigation, climate adaptation, or biodiversity, when the problem and the core problem is that the profitability in agriculture is low from the beginning, so we don't pay enough for the food firsthand. If agriculture was more profitable, if also the smaller farms had a better profit margin, I think we would see more of these environmental friendly methods, biodiversity projects, and also climate projects being implemented. And we are in a situation now when we talk about this ETS system, which in our perspective, the ETS system would kind of circulate the money within the sector, and what we need is additional finance. And especially when we look at the proposals for the coming MFF and the proposals for the CAP, it is challenging times. We all know that with the situation we have, with the conflicts we have in the world, that our politicians are kind of prioritizing defense more than right now climate and food production, and that is an issue. And how we solve that, it's not me who will answer that question, but I think just to raise the big question of, okay, if we then have, because I agree that we need more research and innovation when it comes to both measures and reporting, but we have some things we can actually do now, and then we have to look at, okay, why aren't we doing it? And I think we have to come back to the finance and also advisory services, for example. And I know the situation is quite different in different countries, so that's also something to look at. And also due to these differences, I mean, agriculture is a complex sector to look at these kind of ETS systems, because the differences between the farmers is so big. You have very small family extensive farmers, so you have bigger producers, and we think you should have the option to produce food in the way you want. If you want the smaller farm, you should have that. If you want to work more on the profitability, you should do that. But then how do we construct a system like an ETS that would actually give revenue to these different kind of farmers? That's very complex, and we don't see that the ETS in this case is doing it. So maybe I didn't bring any more solution, but just to raise the topic of the financial situation and how we can handle that one. I think it's good that we have this kind of rooms to highlight this. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, I always like to say something which gets boring probably for a lot of people, but there's 10 commandments and there's the 11 commandments, who pays the bill? Because invariably somebody pays the bill. And, in the end, it looks to me that you say that if, the farmers can pay, so that, they will pass it on. And pretty much everybody's working on thin margins, at least to my knowledge. So somebody's going to have to pay the bill. It ends up being the consumers, I think. And invariably, it will have to be the consumers. I think, sorry to say this, Amanda, but then I'm not pussyfooting, but you guys say we need finance. Great. But if I take the couple of industry people in the room here, they also say they want finance because the power guys got finance to do things. The problem is that, you have a French government with a 5.5% deficit or whatever it is. I can't remember the amount is. We had 3 governments that fell. I think that the Germans are ending up, kind of borrowing $1 trillion or euros to do something. So there's not that much finance left around. So, when we say this, we also have to be realistic. There's simply not money. So somebody's going to have to pay the bill, stay after school and pay the bill. It's just a reality. And I think we better be honest with each other. If this is what society wants, we should be ready to pay the bill. Christian.
No, I really want to be very pragmatic on that. And as I said, I'm very positive on that. And I think like where Denmark has started with looking at, okay, what can be done? What are the climate benefits of concrete measures? And as I said before, I mean, you're doing amazing work on that. You've also said from a Lithuanian perspective. And it's also with agroforestry, what you can do with just with hedges and so on. So I think there are some very clear actions what you can do with precision farming.
Mm-hmm.
There are very clear actions that can be done, that can be quantified. And as I said before, and what I see is there is a willingness to pay from within the value chain, because the big players in the value chain understand that this is about the future resilience, and that this is a very good investment into the future. There is willingness to pay from outside the value chain. Again, I'm coming with the example of rewetting of peatlands. What the few operators who are doing this in Europe, what they are seeing is you can easily get carbon prices of 200-300 euros for that, because you have a high biodiversity aspect in that. So people like to pay for that. And peatlands now, as we talked before about defense, what is now also catching up is that peatlands can also be a very good defense at our eastern borders. And member states are looking into this. So we're again talking about how we use our landscapes. So there is, I think, there are the actions, there is the willingness to pay. There is also the public budgets to do that. But it's just how can we use them most effectively? And I think in there, also policymakers need to understand better where do I get the biggest return? And for that, we need better MRV. And this we need to put out, and this is what we are trying to do. So we really want to work very pragmatically in being clearer. What can be done? What are the benefits? And in mobilizing the money, which I think is there, but it needs a good market. We need to build a good market in which everyone will be able to trust. And we've done that in other sectors, Andre, what we've done, and it took also a bit of time, but we've succeeded on that. I've talked before on what we are doing, for example, for procuring green hydrogen, what we're doing on others with the Innovation Fund, with the European Innovation Council. So we know from other sectors also very well how we can finance innovation, and I think we can do that here as well. And we will, I think, from our side, what we really want to look for pragmatic solution to get that started. And it is, of course, about the whole system there. I mean, we cannot do what you've done in Denmark with a tax solution, but it is in the end something that pays off for the farmers, because you look at the pricing system and you look at how you use the revenues from that, and we will be looking into something that we can do for Europe that is voluntary for farmers, that will strengthen the market position of farmers, that enables the financing from within the value chain, that mobilizes revenues from outside the value chain. And this can only be done with everyone involved in the value chain. Just to say on the nature credits, as I've said, for a lot of the things that we are promoting with the carbon removal, carbon farming certification, peatlands, agroforestry, afforestation. It's good for biodiversity as well. Although here, I would look at the synergies first. And then, of course, we can develop that further. We have all the co-benefits already in our framework. So I would really plead that we look at pragmatic solutions on what can be done now to get started and to build trust in such a market.
How much, Christian? How much have you? So again, I don't want this to be bilateral, but nevertheless, it's important. I'm going to COP, and I'm going to deal. I'm telling you flat out now. I'm going to deal with climate and trade. It's going. You know, I spoke to a South African negotiator last night. I'm speaking to the Brazilian this afternoon, and they're pounding on this. This is not going to be funny for European negotiators. How much, to what degree has any thinking been done as to how do you deal with this? I mean, practically so far we've got two options. One of them free allocation, the other one is CBAM.
I think in the same way as for the European supply chains, I think there's a large interest in how we can make our global supply chains more resilient. If we think about coffee, or if you also think about cotton or other biomass. And so it cannot be a way that we help those farmers who supply us also to become more resilient, to generate additional revenues for them and to secure our supply chains. So if we're thinking about international credits that we would finance to fulfill our 90% target, I think can be very interesting to also see, okay, how could we use that again together with the sector to secure our international supply chains, make them more resilient, and help also the companies to make those net zero claims. So I think again here, I think to start with, it can be a very positive story.
Thank you. There was a gentleman. Okay, there was a gentleman here, but it was you? Yeah. So then Daniel Leroux from the French farmers which on the screen, and they'll come back to Antoine, and then we can circle back. Go ahead, please.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, indeed. Go ahead, and then we'll go to Daniel.
Thank you, David. No, I wanted to react a bit to what you, Christian, are saying, because you're saying that you see willingness to pay within the value chain. It's something that we're not seeing from our end, because we have some of our fertilizer producers that are presenting on the market zero carbon fertilizers, and they are of course more expensive, no doubt about that. There is no willingness to pay from there, and of course because our customers are farmers and they cannot buy it. So farmers, it's very clear, cannot do it. The question is, how do we make those who want to pay? So it has to be voluntary, in my view, anything. And we're having a lot of discussions internally for demand creation. Mm-hmm. How do you generate this demand? It has to go towards the end of the value chain, actually.
Yeah, and I think what is underlying all of that is the monitoring, reporting, verification. Mm-hmm. So how do you credibly show the climate benefits of that, and how do you then get you guys who have that innovation together with within the right guys in the value chain? And I think this is where we, as European Commission, can always be most helpful in creating European markets.
Mm-hmm. But I understand, in your view, it remains voluntary.
I think because we need to build the trust for now. But of course, in the longer run, also for you need to have clarity about the demand. Mm-hmm. that will be coming your way. And I think when this is, and if we are really talking about the long term, that's always, of course, the nice thing with a carbon market, because you can, with a cap, you see where you are going. You give a long-term demand signal. We still need to see how we do that for removals, which is a new instrument on that. But of course, I mean, all of that are not, as you said, these are not I mean, all of these are not small questions. If we go towards 2050, 2060, it's about the use of our land. That's a big question where, of course, we need a clarity on where we are going.
Let me go to the gentleman there and then to that.
Thank you, Chairman. David Carpintero from the European Ethanol Association. So we represent the European ethanol producers, and we are one of these value chains that benefits from savings in agriculture. At the moment, we have an average GHG emissions of 80% according to RED methodology. We are on our way to try to get as close as possible to 100%. Some of our members, some of the members, for example, of Copa Cogeca as well, have now gone above 100% in some of the biorefineries. For example, I'm talking about, because they put it publicly, in one in Sweden. And we only use 1% of EU agricultural land. I think there is potential when you look also to the strategic role of biorefineries contributing to both energy security and food security. And what you are doing, and we appreciate the reports very much, and we look closely to these developments because right now at the moment, RED gives you the opportunity to go through NATS2 values for agricultural emissions. However, it's open also to private schemes, of course, audited under the RED methodology by the voluntary schemes. But this could open new opportunities. We move closer to this 100%. So I think this could be an opportunity that we look at very, very closely. However, I think your optimism regarding the bioeconomy strategy is not felt by the industry. The draft that was leaked a few days ago, that seems to be quite a recent draft, is worrying. We are highly concerned. The EU Bioeconomy Alliance, we are discussing it. We are about to share with you some observations that we consider which are very relevant. I don't know if it might still be under inter-services consultation, but we think the current draft is very, very concerning at this moment. Could jeopardize basically the same objectives that is set in this strategy.
Daniel? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's Darrell, not Daniel. But
Can you speak up a little bit, Daniel?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it
Can
is.
Can you hear me?
Hear you, but not very loud. So if you just a little bit possible.
Okay, so I was just saying my name is Darrell, not Daniel, but it's not a big deal. I have the habits from that. I just wanted to come back to what Christian was saying earlier about the willingness to pay. Because I agree on a lot of things that Christian said, especially about the necessity to have more resilience, to find new way of financing, to consolidate the supply chain. I think it's really the heart of the discussion. But I completely disagree about what has been said about the willingness to pay. And I was very surprised to hear about the fact that it will be possible to pay like 200 or 300 euros per ton of carbon. So just for the precision, I work for the French Farmers Association. And in France, we developed a low carbon label. So it's a certification scheme for a voluntary carbon market in 2018, 2019 maybe. And today, the conclusion of this system and the market we try to create is that it's a complete failure because the carbon markets didn't answer the promises, and the farmers who were engaged in the projects today are really, really angry. So it's not only about this specific labelization, it's about the global carbon market, which fell off those last years. And you talked about 200 or 300. I'm really surprised, and I would like to know where those numbers come from, because in France we sell it at 45 euro per ton, and the farmers get 33 euros per ton, and it's already way too expensive for companies. And the only companies that are buying this are, for example, flight companies that have obligation to offset their emissions for domestic flights, for example. And it's the only market we have today. And so, yeah, we have a lot of deception about that. And there is another point, and I would like maybe a beginning of answer, because I see also an inconsistency in the policy, in the vision of the Commission about those. So I know that I'm talking about voluntary carbon credits, so it's not the same thing as the ETS, but I think it's also a way to finance the decarbonization of agriculture, the mitigation, and it reflects what the companies inside or outside the value chain are ready to pay. So I'm just wondering about the vision of the Commission. The 2040 targets, you have the target of minus 90%, but you also have the 3% of international carbon credits, which you mentioned, Christian. And the 3% is a bit misleading because it equals 30% of the GHG emissions that will stay in 2040 according to the target. So it's a lot of emissions, and the Commission is ready to give all these markets of carbon credits to the international certifications and not to the European one. And we already have today no markets at all for carbon credits. We had a little bit, but we have to stop the projects today, and we are really struggling to find new buyers for farmers. And despite this absence of market, you talked about creating demand. We completely agree on that, but we don't see that in the proposal of the Commission. So we agree on the principle, the need to structure the market, the value chain, etc. But what we see of what the Commission is doing on the voluntary carbon credits is really not reassuring, if you know what I mean.
Well, Daniel, thank you very much. I think that, when you go, when you see, I didn't go to, but when you see in the movie, you go to a shrink and then the shrink says, sorry about this, time is over. Sorry, guys, we paid $100 times, well, it's probably not $100 anymore, but paid your money, you got to go home. So unfortunately, we are reaching that time. We can only promise that we will continue discussion. But what I am being provocative now, I think that the one thing that I understood is that the model of crediting, you questioning why we're giving credits or giving a market for international credit when there may be a market for agricultural credit in the EU, and that your programs that are voluntary don't have a market. That's what I understood. However, I also go back, I can't remember what was Antoine or somebody that basically said, yeah, okay, voluntary, but in the end is going to have to be a regulatory solution. I mean, that's what the inevitable outcome of this whole thing. It's a regulatory solution. It's not maybe for today, not maybe for tomorrow, but for the day after tomorrow. So again, I'm just commenting briefly before going to the last round, and I'm going to ask Margosia and then Antoine and then Amanda, and the Commission always has the last word here.
So maybe I'll start with picking up on some of the things that we heard today. For obvious reasons, since it's not my topic, I couldn't contribute so much to the conversation about agriculture, but I think that there are some things that, for example, Amanda mentioned on the nature of agriculture, how different it is from member state to member state or from region to region. And we see the same for forestry. The forestry and forest management is going, or access to biomass is going to be terribly different, whether you're in Spain or you're in Finland or Germany. but so that's at the core also of what is available to you and how you're going to decarbonize. And the reason why I can say that is when you have a gas turbine on your site, it's going to be the same gas turbine whether you're in Spain or you're in Poland. What the difference is probably going to be the access to fossil-free energy. And that's completely different situation if you need to decarbonize than when you need to look at carbon removals from what you do, or you need to decarbonize your activities. And these are big questions because, again, going back to value chains, it's really there are going to be solutions, there are going to be sticks along the value chain. So whenever we're looking at products, whenever we're looking at the markets, I think it's really important to understand where the value lies. And it is true that what we see is like there's no money anywhere, but still there's some money somewhere. For example, innovation fund. To give you one, the Commission proposal for MFF sees money coming from the ETS, for example, for our own resources, 30%. So there are resources, but we need to use them smart. And for us, the value lies in renewable products that are bio-based, that are circular. And you cannot be surprised because I'm representing pulp and paper industry. And I wanted to maybe finish with one observation on the bioeconomy strategy. I understand that Christian and Commission cannot really comment on leaks. We liked it. We see room for improvement for sure, also because we're very close to what we do. So whenever we see action plans, we would like them to be perfect, to draw on standardization, to look into circular content, to make sure that different pieces of legislation can come together in the Commission's thinking. But I would say with being cautious that it's, again, my colleagues are leading on that, it's going in the right direction.
Anton?
Well, okay, let me summarize my thoughts in 4 points. First, do what is already known and what works. So, and there is no need for ETS for this. We can already do things, incentivizing. Second is keep it voluntary. Because there is a burden. Let's start with those who have the willingness to do it. Third thing is support farmers. We cannot afford leaving the burden on farmers. They cannot afford it. And then it's another thing we didn't mention very much, but attention to imports, carbon leakage, CBAM, these sort of things. It's in the report. We didn't talk today, but it's something we need, of course, to pay very much attention.
No, see, the international aspect and the implication of trade and climate, especially that in agribusiness, EU is very competitive and it has a huge surplus, I think, and is something that certainly a source of revenue for many. So I think it's not something that we should take lightly. Amanda?
Thank you. I can just agree with what Antoine just said. Those statements kind of sums up also what I was going to say. But to add something, I think it was a very good comment we just heard from our colleague Darrell from the French farmers here. So would have been interesting to hear more reactions on that one. And I think that links to a good conclusion. As farmers and representing Copa Cocheca, we don't want to be the complaining, bitter farmer in this discussion. We want to see which kind of solution we have, but we have to be quite realistic looking at the individual companies. And I think the example here from France with the carbon credit is an example of that, because we have been positive to the carbon credits as a source of income to farmers. But we have to see that it works and that it don't put the farmer in a very difficult situation. So just to assure you that we don't want to automatically complain when there's new climate legislation here. We want to be in this discussion and see how we can move forward, but it has to be solutions that can work on the ground, because what we need to do is that we need to continue producing food, also because we do it with a higher environmental standard in Europe. I know it differs, but than many other regions, linking to the problem with emission leakage. So we have to put the food production high, and also value the ecosystem services we already also contribute with. We don't see that we get enough revenue for those. So I think there's a big puzzle here. I think if we continue talking, so we can find ways forward that also the individual farmers can trust that they will be supported in this work. And one of the things is also when do we support, and how do we speak about emissions from agriculture? I think the comments on the fertilizers, and I know that there are fossil-free fertilizers, many interesting projects going on that can be implemented, that are implemented. There is an additional cost for the farmer, but that is a very promising example of how we can reduce the emissions. However, that is not counted for when we speak about agricultural emissions, because the production of fertilizers is not within the ESR. So when we speak, and when many people look at the numbers for agriculture and how it's not decreasing and so on, we have quite some things that we're actually doing on farm that does not go into that calculation. And I'm not saying that we should change the way we calculate. I just want to raise the awareness that agriculture falls into quite a lot of different systems, and we have to see the bigger picture also to show the farmers that we see what you are doing, we see the barriers for not doing more, and so on, and then we have to also look at these kind of technical aspects. But thank you for the conversation. I think we had many questions to continue talking about, and just to say that we will want to be in these discussions, but it has to be solutions that will generate extra income on the farm, and this is why we continuously speaking about this additional finance is, as I said in the beginning, that the finance today is not covering the costs for what we're actually doing, and especially not if we want to do climate and environmental work. And that is the situation we put ourselves in throughout many years of developing our systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Very passionate. Christian?
Yeah, equally passionate. Like the discussion, because I think you moved now towards the end, towards a bit more concrete discussion about where to get the money, how to do it, and I think there's a lot of research that we have. For example, under the Mission for Healthy Soils, which is one of the major research programs that we currently have under Horizon, we have, I think, now almost 20 programs that are about carbon farming and that look towards developing these European standards. And just one thing, because I so often hear this argument, yes, every forest is different, every farmer is different. But on the other hand, or at the other hand of the value chain, you maybe have 10 companies, and they want to have the same standard. And this we need to simplify. And this is where we can be helpful. Agriculture, forestry is a European market. It's not a regional or national market. So we need to have the same standards. And this is where we can help. It's also in other industries that you have SMEs, you have big companies, and things are produced in very different ways. So I think this we can handle. And the other thing, of course, the carbon market is not built in one day. And I mean, how much time do we need to get the ETS for energy for the industry going? It was several decades. And I think based on all the information and all the experience that we have, we can be much bigger in that. We need that because the bioeconomy is the future. And then one last comment on to clarify my 200-300 euros. This was for revetting of peatlands. And this was, of course, from companies who have a very high willingness to pay, like Microsoft or others. And of course, this is about when you take things out of production, it's also how you market that, how you can achieve that willingness to pay, whether it's local in your region. I think these are prices that can be done. Of course, it's something different if you do cover crops, nitrification inhibitors, and so on, and you continue to the production of food. I mean, there's a different willingness to pay, and we have to look for also all these different types of demands. But I think we should definitely build on all the good experience that we have from the Label Carbon, that we have from Denmark. And I see my job is really to harmonize that and bring that to a European level.
Thank you, Christian. So, look, we're quite active for those of you that follow us, but there's limitations also to physical limitation, how active we can be. We have a certain amount of passion for agriculture, not being a farmer, of not having a farming background at all. But I have witnessed in many European countries, especially in more the southern part of Europe, the emptying of many rural and even cities, small town cities. And we would not want to see that in agriculture for a variety of reasons, whether it be, some people talk about environment and so on, but there's a way of life, and it's something that connects us to the soil, but also something that connects us to very good quality food, to be quite blunt about it. So, I mean, I'd rather not give that up. So it's important. Now, MRV, I think it's quite critical. That's, you have to measure it before you know what to do with it. So accounting and MRV, carbon accounting, MRV, very important to get it right. But the other thing that you also want to deal with at some point, you have to examine all the options. I think that we are focusing on this option of cap and trade but there are other options, and standards is a possibility. The credit approach that is being mentioned, and we know that there is a provision in the ETS for domestic credits that has never been triggered. The provision for domestic credits in the ETS has not been triggered. Now, it's something that may or may not be considered. I don't know what the Commission is doing in internal councils, but something that maybe should at least be examined in an open-minded way. Of course, this can only be a temporary solution, because in the end, you're going to have to go to a more standardized and more regulatory solution. Promise to continue, and thanking the speakers. Sorry, some of you couldn't be here because you're very passionate and we want you here. But we will continue our discussion to the best that we can. We'll follow up. We'll keep in touch. And again, many thanks to all of you, Christian. Thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank